These are the Attack on Titan, Levi and Mikasa Clash decks. These are the latest in UniVersus CCG's line of entry-level starter deck products that just released with the Attack on Titan Battle for Humanity set. These retail at $14.99 each and are intended to get you into the game, playing and having fun with it. So in this video, what we're going to do is, well, we're not going to crack into it because as you can see, I already kind of destroyed these ones, but we are going to look at the cards inside and talk a little bit about how things have changed, like a lot of things have with Attack on Titan, and see if these really do live up to that entry-level product. Are these going to do what you need for that price point? Let's jump into it. What's up everyone, it's Dan with Maindeck, and welcome to our look at the Attack on Titan Battle for Humanity Clash decks today. As I mentioned in the intro, these are the newest starter deck level product to help get you into UniVersus CCG if you are a fan of the Attack on Titan property. Now, as we mentioned in some of our previous videos on UniVersus, there have been a lot of changes going on in UniVersus as they're trying to address what has really been a major problem for the game, a major hurdle, which is getting people into it and getting people to learn the game, understand it, and have fun with it. And so, of course, this early level product is going to be one of the places where you're going to see some of the most change happening. So the question we're going to be asking in this video is, what are the changes that are happening in these decks to make that problem a little bit less of a problem? And are these the right changes? Are these effective? So we're not only going to be taking a look at the cards you're going to get inside of each of these Clash decks, but really looking at it from this lens of, is this helping you learn the game and get started and get into the game, or is this going to prove a little bit more of a hindrance? So let's take a look at them. Now, there are two Clash decks this time, just like usual. They always release these in pairs. We have Mikasa and Levi this time, and so the two Ackermans are going to duke it out if you're going to play the Clash decks against each other, and I recommend you do. I'm going to start out by saying right away that these decks are now made specifically to play against each other, but they're still sold separately, which is kind of an interesting different choice, but you can pick whichever character you like more, I guess. The really curious thing about this is that one of the major changes that they made to these Clash decks this time is the two characters, and I'm going to go ahead and pull them up on screen here so you can take a look, and you can tell me what you notice about these two characters. The very interesting thing about the characters that we have in the Clash decks this time is that they both are 6 hand size, 15 health characters, which is drastically lower than what 6 health or 6 hand size characters usually are. And they both have the exact same abilities, or ability, I should say, just one enhance, which is to commit them to make your attack at +4 speed. This is a major change, especially when you consider that the previous Clash decks would come with characters like, here's All for One, from set 4, I believe, and look at the just look at the difference between these, and go ahead and take that in. 12 more health, 2 more abilities, and these are wordy, complicated abilities as well. It's certainly a very, very different thing. And of course, these characters are quite different also than their booster pack counterparts. So here we have Levi Ackerman, Strong Soldier. They do have these same symbols on them. This is an error in printing. These are not supposed to be attuned symbols. They're supposed to be circles like in the UR Levi. But this Levi has way more abilities, way more health, and is all around a lot better. One of the big things that you need to know going into these Clash decks is that these are not going to be decks that you can just immediately sleeve up and play in a tournament and expect to get anywhere, because this isn't enough health and this ability is not strong enough on its own compared to the rest of the card pool. Now, with that in mind, we're going to put a pin on our final thoughts on everything, set those aside for a second, just talk about each individual deck, what they bring to the table outside of this character card, and then we're going to come back at the end and talk about how I think the whole package works together. So let's start with the Mikasa deck. Now, right away, I want to mention that both of these decks are sharing a resource. They have the air resource shared between them, and then the Levi deck has the death resource, while the Mikasa deck has the fire resource. And actually what that means is, given just the card pool in Attack on Titan, there are a bunch of cards in these decks that are shared between the two decks. That said, the decks do have their own styles and flares and a little bit of strategy behind them that is different despite the characters having the same ability. Now, inside each deck, you are going to get 4 rare cards. In the Mikasa deck, we have 2 copies of the attack Mikasa Arrives at Guard Castle, and then we have 2 copies of the Foundation This Is My Chance. Now this is my chance is a somewhat straightforward speed enhance that just wants you to have the only one attack in your card pool when you use it. Well, Mikasa Arrives at Utgard Castle is a solid, I guess, 4-cost attack that has a blitz ability that allows you to discard a card from your hand to put the top card of your deck in your momentum. Right away, something that I noticed after playing this a couple of times, the really weird thing about this card in this deck is that this deck includes absolutely no cards that allow you to spend your momentum. I'm not sure why. It's a very weird choice to put this rare in this deck when there is nothing to spend your momentum on. It ends up making it an absolute trap to play this card. So my first piece of advice is if you play this deck, you play this card, just don't use the Blitz because there is no reason to do so. There's nothing that spends your momentum in the entire Mikasa deck. Now, when you go ahead and upgrade the deck, this card could easily become a clutch, powerful card to use because of its ability to fill that momentum going into like a 4th attack in a string that can be a powerful or EX that can like close the game or something. But for just the Clash deck alone, this card is one you can easily review at the start of the turn or something. Don't worry about it. Or if you just really need an attack, it's there. It's a 4 for 4, which is like, it's an attack. But I did think that was really interesting. Now, in the rest of the Mikasa deck, you're going to get a lot of what you're going to see in the Clash decks in general is a lot of simpler cards. So right at the front here, I pulled out 2 0-drop foundations that have 5 checks and no abilities. This just has Roar has some flavor text on it. Primitive Desire has nothing written on it at all. And then you have some other fairly simple abilities. Flip your attack with the printed difficulty 4 or less gets +2 speed. There we go, powering up the Arrives at Utgard Castle, but also works on other attacks that actually do something in the deck. We have Failed Resolve. This is just remove it to give this attack +3 speeds. You see a lot of just little effects like this. Enhances single enhanced foundations that just do one thing. It's usually a speed or damage modifier, and that just makes the game kind of flow. It's pretty simple. Look through your foundations, which ones add or am I doing an attack, which ones add speed or damage, am I trying to block, which ones reduce damage or reduce speed. Makes it easy to kind of parse what's going on the board and figure out what you're doing. And then as far as the attacks that you're going to get, we have some pretty straightforward ones. In the Mikasa deck, I really liked that it had these 2 cards, Underhanded Smash and Saving Stab, which are some pretty similar type attacks that have blitzes that just give the next attack you play a buff. This one's +3 speed and this one's +3 damage, which introduces players, I think, to a little bit of that interesting sequencing, figuring out, which one do I want to do first? What blocks do I think they're holding? Because one's a low, one's a high. So I like that quite a bit. And then the thing that I thought was really interesting about these, especially when we sat down to play right away, we're looking at these 15 health characters, and then we looked at these attacks and go, well, hang on, we have like this is literally a 12 damage attack. You could use this and the foundation, Failed Resolve. Oh, that's the speed one. Well, you use this in some foundations to buff the damage. I don't remember which ones are in here now. But you can get this to be lethal damage pretty easily. And it's not too hard to get it to like unblockable speed also. Now, these are some of these new 8 difficulty attacks with 4. This one has a 4 check. This one still has a 3 check. These are kind of a new theme in Attack on Titan, these gigantic attacks. And I will say that it's pretty easy in these Clash decks who are not used to the game to go too aggro on each other and to make these lethal haymakers. But when we started to play a little more conservatively, I was playing with new player and we were just trying to explore things. When I showed him playing a little more conservatively, then these got a little more interesting and they were kind of fun haymakers to play. And the new player did really enjoy like tapping things out, like, okay, we're going all in, let's see what happens. Which was a lot of fun. So actually, I wasn't sure about these, but I ended up kind of liking them in here. Not to mention the Mikasa deck, you do have a really fun combo that blew his mind to explore this one, but this attack is +X damage. X equals the printed speed of the attack preceding this attack in your card pool. So when he saw Mikasa's Unrelenting Assault for the first time following a Get Movin', and I was like, yeah, this is a 3 low for 11. He was like, that is crazy. Which was, kind of a fun experience to see. It starts to show you a little bit of that strategy in there. So there's a bunch of cards like that. Again, it's fairly simple stuff in here. But when you start to play the whole deck together, you do kind of start to get the feel for things. It ended up working pretty well together, as far as the start is concerned, aside from the fact that, again, this rare doesn't actually do anything in this deck. And it's really just a deck that's built around am I going to dive in or not? Am I going to give speed to this thing or not? But those are the kind of early level choices that we take for granted when we've been playing this game for a long time, and they're really good for new players to get to explore in a safer environment. So before we get to the final review and we talk more about that, let's talk about the Levi deck really quick as well. Now, like I said, some of these cards are going to be shared between them. In fact, even like Get Movin' is shared between the two decks, as well as things like Roar, you know, these air foundations you're going to see in there. But there are some interesting differences in the Levi deck that really do make it feel a little bit different, and it's fun to kind of explore both of them. So his rare attack is positional advantage, and unlike Mikasa's rare attack, this attack is actually really, really sweet. It is a 6 cost, 7 mid for 6. In this deck, it actually works with the rest of the deck in that it says Blitz. If this is the only attack in your card pool, your rival adds 1 foundation from their stage to their hand. So it has a little bit of debuilding, which matches with there's some other like sacrifice cards in here that can kind of debuild the opponent a little bit, which is, certainly a death theme as well, which is nice. And then has this attack gets +1 damage for each card in your rival's hand. So if the opponent's trying to play a little more conservatively, this can be sort of a bit more of a punishing move where they have to try and get through this, which with Levi's +4 speed can be a little bit difficult. So that was a really cool attack in there. And then the rare is the lethality of Levi Ackerman. Now we had some interesting things where I had to say, yeah, I know you have 2 of that, but it is unique. So you can only have 1 of it in play, or you have to sacrifice 1 and you play the second one. And this was another fun card to explore some of the interactions with it when you started to kind of realize, okay, so this has 2 once per turns on it, and one of them, I can use to give my attack speed. The other one I can use when my attack hits them, so the speed helps get to that, and then it seals, and we got to go over what seal means and everything. So these decks, despite being entry-level decks, are not like demo decks. There are a bunch of mechanics and keywords, and you do have to take the time to kind of explain these to your opponent if you are hopefully a more experienced player, or if you're new players, you do have to look up what some of these things mean, which is, something to just be aware of. Now, again, the foundations are fairly straightforward in here. Here we have Futile Attempts, which is just commit it. This attack is -3 damage. So there's a little bit of control. That's in both these decks. Just showing some more examples of that. Failed Rescue. Remove. This attack is +3 speed. And then Against a Tough Bunch. And now this is a really cool card in here, and I think that's a pretty powerful card, actually. And one that's going to go with a little bit of the theme that Levi uniquely has. Now, this one says, response, remove. After your unblocked attack deals damage, your rival loses 3 health. Not to a minimum of 1 or anything. This can go ahead and take them out of the game. The 3 health, and you could have multiple of these in play. And there is actually a little theme in here of sort of like unstoppable damage. This life loss, we do have some throws in here. We got to explain that keyword a little bit. And then Toothy Bite, which is our way of spending momentum in here. So this is the only card in the Levi deck that spends momentum. So the only card within both Clash decks that spends momentum at all, which I thought was interesting that it didn't have even just a single like powerful or EX attack. But this one says you can spend a momentum. If you do, your rival loses 2 health. And that is kind of nice with some other cards in here. For example, Levi's Overhead Strike, which has, if the rival has lost health this turn, this attack gets -1 difficulty. And then in response, if this attack deals damage, clear 1 other attack from your card pool. So there are a number of little like synergies in here that kind of work nicely with this theme of just like dealing unblockable damage, making Levi kind of unstoppable. Plus, not to mention we have Get Moving for that 11 speed attack. Ultra Hard Steel is another giant attack in here. This one's 8 speed for 10 damage on an 8 difficulty. So that's, there are some similarities between the two decks, but they do have kind of distinct play styles where the Mikasa deck is a little more stringy, trying to play multiple attacks. And then the Levi deck is a little more about just trying to like put in unstoppable attacks, make you lose life, clear the card pool, get down to 1 again, and use some of your other card effects on your lone attack in the card pool or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of how those decks play a little bit. But again, a lot of these effects are fairly straightforward, fairly simple, not too complicated. Now, the question is, after making these changes, we've gone away from all-for-one nonsense. We've gone away from the old Deku Clash deck where you had to like guess what zone your opponent was playing, and even from the recent Toga and Uraraka decks, which I liked quite a bit, but which were definitively more complicated than the decks we have here. how do these work for getting new players into the game? That's the question, because we have the Challenger series now. If you want to get a pre-con for a constructed tournament, the Challenger series is really what you should buy. The Clash decks are really made specifically for new players in the game. And when I sat down after we played a bunch of games with my new player, I said, okay, how do you feel about these? He had played some Challenger decks, he played demos, and he played these. How do you feel about the Clash decks and these characters that have fewer abilities and lower health? And he had a wonderful response for me. He said, I thought that these made the game so much easier to get into, so much easier to play, so much easier to learn. These decks worked so much better because the character doesn't have a lot you have to think about. You can focus on reading your attacks, reading your foundations, and figuring that out. You just know once per turn you can go ahead and boom, +4 speed to something, or save him to use as a resource on a block or something. And the 15 health, he pointed out, was his favorite thing because the game was just going to end. And players could more quickly get to the point where they realize, oh, I see what I did wrong. I know where I tapped out. I shouldn't have committed everything, and then I ended up getting punished for it. I want to try again. I'm going to try again and be a little more defensive. And I think that's actually pretty cool. Not to mention, when you play these against each other and they both have the exact same effects, you don't have to learn a second set of abilities. I mean, I think this could have, I think one of these could have said +4 damage or something. That might have made sense for Levi with the throws, but also maybe that was too powerful with the throws in the Clash deck experience. But having these two characters have the same effects reduced another hurdle to kind of getting into the game. And when we played our games with these Clash decks, my new player came out of this and said, I understand the game so much better than when we were trying to play with Challenger decks, when we tried playing at the pre-release, and when we tried playing the demos. It was sort of it ended up really being a stepwise motion of, if you start with the demos and then move into the Clash decks, you really do move the player into a bit of an easier experience each time, because they're learning some of the core mechanics and then a few new ones are being added on top. So I would say, ultimately, do I recommend these Clash decks? For new players who are just getting into UniVersus, these Clash decks are a great step in your ladder to understanding the game. I think you are going to get a bunch of usable cards in here for sure, so don't think that you're spending $15 on a deck that you're just going to throw away afterwards. Think about maybe it's like a movie ticket that you're buying to explore the game with this character, but then, unlike a movie, afterwards you do have a bunch of cards that you can use to build a deck with. Just, you don't really want to use this character for building a constructed deck with after you're done learning the game from the Clash deck. I think these are a great stepping stone to actually learning the game, but I don't want players to get confused and purchase these decks expecting to get out of the box a tournament-ready experience, because what you will find in the full game is that this amount of health is not enough to be able to actually protect yourself and live very easily against some serious competitive decks in the format. But when you're just learning the game, I think these are a great way to figure things out, make the games take a lot less time. They will end, those big attacks will plow through and take someone out, and you can shuffle up and play again and swap decks and experience that. So for me, these are a good entry-level product, but that's it. I wouldn't buy them past entry level at that point. Pick up singles, pick up booster packs, pick up the Challenger deck. The Aaron and Armin Challenger deck is a great deck to grab and play at your LGS with, but for learning the game, the Clash decks are where it's at. So hope you guys enjoyed that little look at the Mikasa and Levi Clash decks for UniVersus. I hope that made some sense to you. Let me know what you think of this Clash deck experience in the comments below. Is this a better way to learn the game, or do they need to go back to putting all-for-ones and overhauls in every Clash deck? I would love to hear what you think in the comments down below, or if you've had an experience learning the game, please, new players, talk to me. Let's talk about this experience. I would love to see you there. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you guys in the next one.